This video might be one of the most beneficial trauma healing videos on this channel. The comment on the screen has 4 subdivisions. Let's read it together. How do I stop defining myself by my trauma and sense of brokenness? Question 1. And start seeing myself as worthy of love and belonging. Question 2. Even when I'm not performing or improving. Number 3. Final question, how do I stop letting childhood trauma and unmet emotional needs define my sense of self-worth? I know I'm not broken, but I can't seem to feel that truth in my body. The truth in my body is question 4. This is a deeply complex question, but the fundamental framework that I'm going to offer you in the next 20 minutes is going to give you a multi-year plan. And yes, I did mean multi-year, not today, not this week, not this month, not even this year. If you've got decades of traumatic history or a deeply traumatic moment, you cannot go from broken low self-worth into high self-esteem and a sense of abiding, unconditional love overnight, and it won't even happen within a year. The trauma literature backs this up. Most of the literature within the field of complex PTSD and even the more spiritually inclined literature in transpersonal psychology indicates at least 3 to 5 years of consistent immersive healing work to go from traumatized and broken to happy and healthy, more or less. But this middle ground is where people get lost. Today's questioner raised a few important points. They recognize that they have been traumatized and broken by the events of the past. They recognize, quite rightfully so, that the ambition for the future is to feel loved and belonging. They also recognize at the end of the question that they should feel that truth in their body. However, they bring in a caveat which I need to challenge. And I challenge this in a way which might be triggering for some people, but I'm triggering from a place of compassion. They say in their question, how can I feel loving even when I'm not performing or improving? And that, unfortunately, is the crux of the conversation. The inner child's wounds should be met with unconditional positive regard. You can accept that there was trauma and damage and betrayal and violation at some horrific moment in the past, and you can still maintain your vision for health and happiness and safety in the future. The inner child is a part of you that gets to go on that journey, but you, as the adult watching this video, unfortunately, you are not free of the consequences of your current behaviors. Today's questioner almost solved their own question by saying, how can I feel worthy of love even if I'm not improving? Unfortunately, I don't know if you should feel worthy of love if you're not improving. With a caveat. The condition of being in love with yourself is conditioned by your behaviors, your actions, your thoughts, your beliefs, and your environmental relationships on a day-by-day basis. If your situation isn't getting better, what evidence do you have that you are surrounded by love on the inside and the outside? Very little evidence. I'm not trying to shame you, I'm just giving you a literal breakdown of the feeling of love, the atmosphere of love. Imagine you were to be in a room filled with white smoke. It'd be very obvious to say, well, I'm surrounded by white smoke. But if you're mentally imagining, how can I feel surrounded by white smoke? But the smoke machine's turned off, and there's a certain series of behaviors to get that smoke machine pumping the smoke out, and it's clearly in the air, you can see it, you can smell it, you can touch it, you're surrounded by it. If that smoke were love, there are actions and behaviors that sequentially need to take place to get the love into the room. And then, thankfully, you'll feel it in your body. This questioner was very wise in their understanding of, I suppose, the basic idea that trauma is stored in the body, it's locked in the nervous system, and it creates all kinds of volatility and shutdown effects which can be healed progressively and sequentially over time. They've got the right idea again that you're moving towards love and deep self-respect. That is one of the outcomes of feeling violated. But here is the ground in between. Firstly, don't expect that you will feel love if you have got years or even decades potentially of childhood trauma of being treated in unloving ways. You can't go from conditional love or even unconditional hate, unconditional abuse, maybe abusive parents who are unconditionally abusive. They were mindless and thoughtless and very bad figures. You can't go from that kind of conditioning to unconditional love on the other end of the spectrum without neutralizing the territory in between and learning how to be in between worlds. A major step forwards in terms of breaking free of the traumatic baggage of the past is letting go of it and not picking it back up again. Not the stage of trying to take on a new load. What do I mean by this? I'll give a different example. Not the baggage example, but something that's a bit more digestion focused. Remember the last time that you had food poisoning? You consumed something that made you sick. It's in your body. It's causing you discomfort. What needed to happen? You needed to throw it up. In this example, the baggage is the toxic food. You've got toxic guts inside of you, and the way to clean it out, the body knows best, you throw it up. When you've immediately thrown up the toxic emotional gunk, like you were to have food poisoning, you do not then go to a fancy 5-star Michelin restaurant. You do not have the appetite for it. Your stomach is not ready for the nourishment. It doesn't mean that you're not worthy of the nourishment. It doesn't mean that one day in the future you won't be able to enjoy fine food and fine feelings. But if you have only just purged yourself of the trauma, or in this case, the bad food, you don't want to eat. Quite literally, when you have food poisoning, there was so much discomfort that you need a bit of a break in your stomach. You need to just exist for a while. You need to just be empty. Don't try and fill yourself with joy and nourishment and love. Just encourage the emptiness feeling. In fact, depending upon what kind of food poisoning you have, sometimes it's a good idea to not eat for 24 hours, to let everything simmer. We're not talking about one-day timelines though when it comes to trauma healing. If you are consistently doing inner child work, you're looking at nervous system regulation and rewiring, and you're likewise looking at more archetypal, transpersonal, spiritual ways to do the full integration stack from brokenness into completion and integration, you need to go into the middle territory. Fundamentally, this is going from I hate myself, I love myself, to just I am myself. See the difference there? Hatred, love, neutralization. It's basically the I am statement. I am this body. I am this environment. I am these relationships. I am this sense of progress or lack of progress. I am this sense of desperation or this sense of aspiration. I am. There's a spiritual psychology that can come into this video. To get a level of detachment from the timeline of your trauma, imagine it over here, the timeline of trauma, from the events that happened in the past, all the way to the possibilities that you imagine from the future. It's moving in a parallel line, right down here. You come out. This happens all the way here. To get a spiritual awareness where you are detached from the story and the personal history gives you a new breakthrough in consciousness to be able to look back on the personal story and not be associated with any of it. This is the healthiest possible understanding of dissociation and detachment. Not traumatic dissociation, not traumatic detachment. Healthy, conscious, spiritual detachment, and to disassociate from your personal trauma history. You have the idea that you're going towards self-love and belonging. And if you were to treat yourself like a stranger you met on the street who is worthy of unconditional positive regard, that Carl Rogers phrase of wishing them well and wishing them well with their dreams, wishing them good health and generally positive regard, if you can step out of your story and temporarily glimpse a new way of relating to yourself outside of the traumatic baggage, and especially the traumatic narrative of the inner critic or the shameful parts inside of you, momentarily, temporarily, through consistent practice over multiple months, you step out, you get back in, you step out, you get back in, you step out, you get back in. That's called meditation or prayer or conscious therapeutic work. You're going into therapy maybe every week for a few months or even potentially a few years if you're doing self-therapy, if you're reading the books I'm recommending on the channel. You can step out of the story of your trauma, but you can't rush towards the end. That goes kind of by itself. The nervous system is self-regulating. The nervous system is healing with more repeated experience that things are no longer like the past. But this is where I need to go back into the difficult point from this video. Today's questioner said, how can I start seeing myself as worthy of love and belonging, even when I'm not performing or improving? Remember the analogy of the smoke filling the room. The smoke is either in the room or it's turned off at the wall. Difficult self-acceptance point. If you are not doing things that are creating a feeling of self-compassion and self-respect, which from my perspective is the feminine and masculine sides of the self-love equation, if you are not living in a way that is compassion-inducing and respect-inducing, you cannot expect to feel self-love in a consistent and reliable way. You might be able to get a glimpse experience or a peak experience, maybe through a deep conversation, a great connection, a great therapeutic experience. You might be able to get a peak at that self-loving state. And you can remember that. That's what I'm talking about here. That peak experience of stepping out of your timeline, being over here, you glimpse detachment from the trauma story, and maybe you glimpse that detachment from a higher level of more spiritual compassion. That is fantastic. But that is not the systemic change to make yourself feel less broken and more integrated. You need to actually live in a way that would encourage an atmosphere of love in your day-to-day life. Dare I say it, again, I'm not getting at you, I'm just trying to work through this problem together with you. If you keep saying to yourself, I am worthy of love, I am worthy of love, I love myself, but you are living in a way that has low moral integrity. You're addicted, you're distracted, you're not in a career you enjoy, you're not in a relationship you enjoy, you're not in an environment you enjoy, your body isn't the way that you know it should be for optimal health or something that feels inspiring with sport and movement, all these different categories of life. If they are not okay, and they lean towards the side of reality which is uninspiring and more broken rather than fixed, you're not going to feel healed. Even the language there, fixed, people would cross their arms and say, oh, you shouldn't talk about being fixed, Jordan. If I'm broken and you're bringing in the metaphor of fixed, you're just reinforcing a dualistic, you're basically reinforcing through the language of fixed that I was indeed broken. Yes. Yes, I am. And I say it with the greatest compassion, having read all of these books, that no matter the language that you are exchanging, whether it's traumatized towards healing or broken towards fixed, the essence behind all of that language pattern is bad negative experience, imagined positive experience, a mending, a fixing, a healing, a reweaving, a threading, an integrating. There's some cohesion. Broken to fixed is fundamentally, energetically and linguistically about taking something that's shattered and putting it back together again. That is to mend, that is to heal, that is to make whole. It's also fixing. The language itself is important. Your fix is self-love. In today's question, the fix, two key parts: to feel worthy of love and belonging, and then finally at the bottom of that question, to feel that truth in your body. That was the final question within the sub-question today. To feel the belonging mentally, but feel it in the body. Question to you: how do you feel love and compassion and respect in your body? It cannot just be a mental narrative. You cannot maintain, as beautiful as that vision might be, you cannot maintain that narrative when the truth of your body is apathy, sickness, addiction, disconnection, and distraction. When the truth of your environment is threat and danger because you maybe live in a bad area or you're living with people you shouldn't be living with, your nervous system is going to be looping on the trauma from the past if you live in an environment that gives you more and more stimulus that mirrors the same wound from back then. You can't avoid the responsibility to get yourself out of a bad situation, and often, again, to give you ownership of your own life, it does mean taking on a conscious, righteous, deeply spiritual will to improve and better yourself. Not because you're broken and shameful, but because there's an experience which has shattered you to some degree, and there is an active process of gathering those pieces and putting them back together again. You are not identifying as a broken person, but you recognize from that place of detachment that part of you has been broken. To accept that part of you has been broken, part of you isn't working the way it should because you're anxious and depressed, or super angry, super grieving, whatever it might be. There's part of your nervous system which is broken, or if I want to use a softer language, dysregulated. See what I'm doing? A lot of the language that you'll see on YouTube and reading the books, when people say, I'm feeling dysregulated, you can substitute that with the synonym of broken. You might say, from a sophisticated language pattern, no, I'm meaning dysregulated, I'm meaning that my nervous system has a variety of chemical responses, and haven't you heard about polyvagal theory? Yes, I have heard about polyvagal theory, but the energetic linguistics behind any scientific way of presenting something is fundamentally stripped back to the core emotion of this is bad, this is good. Dysregulated nervous system bad, regulated nervous system good. Traumatized memory and traumatized images and flashbacks and flooding bad. None of that is good. Like, to be in a state of equanimity and peace is what we're aiming towards. To get there, this is a wrapping up point for the video, to get to a point of equanimity and self-love, to accept that you were broken, and really let that language sink in, is a significant step forwards in fixing the brokenness through embracing the inevitability and the unavoidable reality of being the sole person who's responsible for your healing. It is not your fault that that happened to you, but it is your responsibility to make it better. That is the fundamental truth of self-healing. Even if you're going to a therapist or you're working in a community of very therapeutic and very conscious individuals, it is your responsibility. There's a difference between the shame-based brokenness and the therapist within who sees a broken situation and a misaligned memory of the situation or a misaligned nervous system, a nervous system that's looping on the past. Whatever language you want to use, the inner therapist can see that this is not right. They can also see that this is where you need to go, the love and the belonging. You can't cross the divide if you don't accept that it needs to change and that you are the one who's responsible. If it doesn't feel like you are surrounded by an atmosphere of love, take a close examination of your life. Are you addicted to things that you should cut away from your life? Are you in relationships which are draining your energy? Are you uninspired by your vision for the future? And have you, unfortunately, let a few too many bad behaviors and daily vices stack up in a way that tilts your self-esteem, not because of the past, but because of the present, towards a negative, low self-worth state? Sometimes it's a trauma from the past that's making you feel broken, but sometimes when you've got a very strong image, again, I really can be compassionate to this. I likewise have my own issues that I've worked through. When you've got a strong image of a certain moment of abuse or a certain moment of horror, and that comes to your mind through nightmares or daily visions, and it's then combined with bad choices on a daily basis, bad dietary choices, bad sleeping habits, bad relationships, you get the idea. They become blended and molded together. And sometimes there's a logical fallacy in the mind that I'm suffering from the trauma of the past, whereas actually, that was only 20% of the problem on this random Tuesday, and the other 80% of the problem was your daily habits which were in your control. I know that this sounds like it's a shaming voice, but it is not. I'm speaking in favor of just how much power and agency you have to better your situation. If after 6 months of stacking up generally positive habits for 80% of the days in a row, you still are flooded by the trauma of the past, that's okay. That's reasonable. It's expected, as I started the video, that it will take 3 to 5 years to work through major traumatic patterns and to feel like you have this sense of traumatic baggage that just won't go away. But you will have much higher emotional resilience if you are stacking the wins and stacking the generally self-loving behaviors, and eventually you will wake up, and this is something that's really crucial, maybe the crescendo moment for the video. You can have an evening where there's a nightmare scenario, you are repeating the worst of the moment, and you wake up with a fright. It's 3 a.m. in the morning, you're sweating buckets. But because for 2 months in a row, you've been building healthy relationships, you have someone to call. Because for 2 months in a row, you've been looking after your body with a good diet, no drugs and no drink. The sweat comes out quickly, and it's not toxic sweat that's getting all these kinds of subchemicals and artificial products all over you, and you've got this broken body because the body's been fueled with terrible non-foods and drugs and drinks. That sweat comes out of you. Your body literally has the ability to sweat out the emotional toxins. Because you haven't clogged yourself up with bad food, you've got a healthy relationship, someone to talk to. Your body knows how to deal with the stress because you're not poisoning it on a daily basis. And guess what? You go back to sleep eventually because you've got a job that you look forwards to, which you're about to go to in the morning. Or maybe you've got family responsibilities and you've improved your relationship with your husband, your wife, or your children. The lifestyle of the individual is, to a significant degree, one of the most deciding factors in long-term trauma healing, even if they're given a world-class therapist. Imagine the highest quality therapist you could think of. They're going into the ghetto, the person's homeless, they're surrounded by danger, and they've got a traumatic memory of abuse from their childhood. That same person, traumatic abuse from the childhood, but they're in a safe, loving, supportive environment. The therapist has 2 very different people they can work with, even though the trauma itself is more or less identical. The environment matters, and you are in control of your environment. You are in control of your daily choices. And it is okay to not yet feel the truth of love in your body. It will come eventually, but it's not going to arrive through pure therapeutic work. It will arrive through consistent, loving action, and making you feel like you have a belonging in this body and a belonging in this world. I know it's just a theory. I know I'm not giving you all the solutions right away. I'm just trying to inspire your agency. Many people liked this comment. That's why I chose to do a video on it. There are multiple categories within this category of going from broken to fixed. All I want to remind you is that you're in control. You get to choose what you put into your body. You get to choose who you spend time with. You may not have been able to in the past, and it might have been devastating, but you are the one to rescue yourself from this pain. It's your responsibility. And when you feel down because you don't feel belonging and you don't feel love, from the most loving but righteous sense of agency inside of me, I can say, well, maybe it's your responsibility and maybe you let yourself down. Not traumatic shame. If you're a shame-based person, you might think that I'm putting you down. I'm not putting you down. You can say that again. Detach yourself from the timeline. I'm speaking soul to soul here. You know better. You've got the skill. You've got the power. You can see where the love is going. You can get yourself out the timeline of the personal story, bring yourself into a more spiritual center perspective, and take ownership of your own healing journey. And that really is all you can do, and it's everything you need to do. It does get better, but you have to make better choices on a consistent basis while doing the deep, focused therapeutic work, and there is no way that you will consistently feel a sense of belonging and love in your body if you are not behaving in loving ways that make you want to belong in your body. That's the difficult truth. Leave your stories down in the comment section. I'm here to help. If I've said anything that was not perfectly calibrated, it's often difficult to talk to thousands of people at once in a 20-minute one-take video, but I've tried my best, and hopefully you can feel from the fact that I've made 300 videos on this channel for free to try and help people with their trauma issues and aspirations. I do care about you getting better. I'm not trying to shame you. I'm just trying to give a new perspective. Be well. I'll see you in the comment section, or this other trauma psychology video right there on the screen. Some practical tips over there. Some good books as well.